Everything changes the moment the chase ends. Not because silence is loud, but because silence reveals what constant effort was hiding. Most people think the person who stops calling first, stops sending long messages, or stops fixing every argument has simply given up. The truth is often much deeper than that. There comes a point when emotional energy runs out. A person who spent months or even years holding a relationship together suddenly reaches a place where there is nothing left to prove. No dramatic goodbye, no angry speech, no desperate attempt to be understood. Just quiet distance. At first, it looks like nothing has changed. Life moves forward as usual. But beneath the surface, an invisible shift begins. The person who was always being pursued slowly realizes the pursuit has stopped. That realization can trigger confusion, curiosity, anxiety, regret, or even unexpected attempts to reconnect. What happens next surprises far more people than they realize, because human psychology is built around patterns, and when a familiar pattern suddenly disappears, the mind immediately starts searching for answers. Many people believe that stopping the chase is a clever strategy to make someone miss you. That idea has become popular across social media and relationship advice, but it misses the deeper reality. Most people do not stop chasing because they are playing a game. They stop because they are emotionally exhausted. They have reached the point where every conversation feels one-sided. Every apology comes from the same person. Every compromise asks the same heart to bend a little further. They gave reassurance when they needed reassurance themselves. They kept reaching out while wondering why the effort was never returned. Over time, hope slowly turns into fatigue. The silence that follows is not created to manipulate another person. It is often the natural result of someone protecting the little emotional strength they still have left. One of the most misunderstood facts about relationships is that people rarely notice what they have while it is constantly available. The human mind quickly adapts to routines. Daily messages become expected instead of appreciated. Kindness becomes normal instead of special. Emotional support begins to feel permanent instead of precious. This is not always because someone is selfish. It is simply how the brain adjusts to repeated experiences. When attention has always been there, its absence becomes impossible to ignore. The person who once expected another text, another phone call, another apology, suddenly faces something unfamiliar. Nothing arrives. The usual pattern disappears. That is often the exact moment questions begin forming inside their mind. At first, those questions are small. Then they grow louder with every passing day. What makes this process so fascinating is that not everyone reacts the same way. Two people can experience the exact same silence and respond in completely different ways. One person may immediately become curious and reach out. Another may pretend not to care while privately thinking about you more than ever before. Someone with emotional maturity may begin reflecting on their own actions and recognize where the relationship became unbalanced. Someone who avoids emotional responsibility may become defensive instead. Others may wait, expecting you to return, because that has always happened before. Their reaction depends on many hidden factors, including their personality, emotional habits, attachment style, past experiences, and whether the connection was built on genuine love or simple comfort. That is why no single response tells the whole story. Human emotions are far more complicated than most people realize. There is another side to this that almost nobody talks about. The person who stops chasing is changing too. While the other person is trying to understand the silence, the one who stepped away is often learning something equally important. They begin discovering what life feels like without constantly carrying another person's emotional weight. They slowly remember what peace feels like. They notice how much energy they once spent trying to fix problems that were never theirs alone. At first, this change feels uncomfortable because letting go of old habits is never easy. But with time, that discomfort often becomes freedom. The need for constant reassurance fades. The fear of losing someone loses its power. Confidence quietly begins replacing anxiety. This internal transformation is often invisible to everyone else, but it becomes one of the biggest turning points in a person's emotional life. Throughout this video, you will discover why people often react so strongly after realizing you have stopped chasing them. You will learn what usually happens inside their mind during the first days of silence, why confusion always comes before action, and how curiosity can slowly replace certainty. You will also discover the hidden tests that some people use to find out whether they still have access to your attention. Most importantly, you will learn the difference between someone who truly values you and someone who only valued being chased. That difference is easy to miss, yet it changes everything about how you should respond. By the end of this video, you will understand why silence can reveal more than endless conversations ever could, why emotional patterns are stronger than most people realize, and why walking away peacefully is sometimes the most powerful decision a person can make. The final part of this video may be the most important of all, because it explains the one reaction that reveals the true nature of any relationship. It is a reaction many people never expect, yet once you recognize it, you will never look at emotional distance the same way again. That single insight has helped countless people stop blaming themselves for relationships they spent years trying to save alone. It replaces confusion with clarity and guilt with understanding. Sometimes the greatest answers do not come from another conversation. They come from quietly observing what happens when your effort is no longer available. Welcome to our channel, where we explore the hidden psychology behind relationships, emotional strength, human behavior, and personal growth in ways that are simple, practical, and thought-provoking. If you enjoy learning why people behave the way they do and want insights that can help you build healthier relationships while protecting your own peace, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our future videos. Now, let's uncover what really happens inside someone's mind the moment they realize you have finally stopped chasing them. At first, they usually do not notice anything has changed. That surprises many people because they expect their silence to create an immediate reaction. In reality, the human mind depends heavily on routine. When someone has become accustomed to receiving your attention every day, your care slowly becomes part of their normal life. They expect your message to arrive because it always has. They assume you will check on them because that is what you have done countless times before. If an argument happens, they believe you will eventually reach out first. If distance appears between you, they expect you to close that distance. These expectations are rarely spoken out loud, yet they become deeply rooted over time. When one person consistently carries the emotional weight of the relationship, the other person often stops questioning whether that effort will always be there. It simply becomes part of the relationship's rhythm. So when you suddenly become quiet, they do not immediately think you are leaving. Their first explanation is much simpler. They believe you are busy. Maybe work has become stressful. Maybe family responsibilities have taken your attention. Maybe you just need a little space. Whatever reason they choose, it allows them to believe everything will soon return to normal. They are not worried because the old pattern has always restored itself before. They have watched you return after disagreements. They have seen you apologize even when you were deeply hurt. They have experienced your patience over and over again. Their confidence is not built only on your love. It is built on repetition. The mind naturally believes tomorrow will look like yesterday until something proves otherwise. That is why your absence does not feel real during the first stage. It feels temporary. They expect another message, another phone call, another attempt to reconnect, another moment where you decide the relationship matters more than your own exhaustion. Without realizing it, they are waiting for history to repeat itself once again. Days pass and the expected message never arrives. The routine they depended on begins to crack. Slowly, certainty starts giving way to confusion. The human brain is constantly searching for familiar patterns because familiar patterns create emotional safety. Predictable behavior allows people to feel secure. When those patterns suddenly disappear, the brain notices much faster than most people realize. It starts comparing the present with the past. Something feels different. Something is missing. The silence that once seemed temporary now feels unusual. Quiet questions begin forming inside their mind. Why haven't they reached out yet? Why are they suddenly so calm? Why aren't they reacting the way they always do? Did something happen? Are they angry? Have they finally stopped caring? Did they actually move on? These questions often appear before the person even admits they are thinking about you. During this stage, confusion quietly replaces confidence. They no longer feel certain about what comes next. because the relationship is no longer following its familiar script. Many people underestimate how uncomfortable uncertainty can be. The brain prefers a painful certainty over endless unanswered questions. At least certainty provides direction. Uncertainty forces the mind to keep searching for answers. That search consumes attention. They replay old conversations. They remember small moments they previously ignored. They begin wondering whether there were signs they missed. Even if they try to distract themselves, the unanswered questions return because interrupted patterns naturally pull attention back toward themselves. What once felt completely predictable now feels strangely unfamiliar. Curiosity begins replacing comfort, and curiosity rarely remains silent for very long. As uncertainty grows, many people begin observing far more carefully than before. Instead of directly asking what changed, they often become quiet investigators. They start paying closer attention to everything connected to you. If they follow you online, they notice your activity more than they used to. They wonder whether you seem happier. They notice if you are spending time differently. If mutual friends mention your name, they listen more carefully than before. Small details that once seemed unimportant suddenly become meaningful because the mind is trying to collect information that explains your silence. This does not automatically mean they suddenly fell deeply in love. That is one of the biggest misunderstandings people make. Observation is often driven more by uncertainty than romance. Human beings naturally dislike unanswered questions. When information is missing, the brain attempts to fill the gaps. It starts searching for clues. Every small action becomes potential evidence. If you appear calm, they wonder why. If you seem busy living your own life, they wonder whether you have emotionally detached. If you remain silent despite opportunities to reconnect, that silence itself becomes information. The more peaceful you appear, the more difficult it becomes for them to predict your next move. Predictability once gave them comfort. Now unpredictability demands their attention. They may never admit how closely they are watching, but internally, they are trying to understand whether your silence is temporary or permanent. That search for answers often becomes stronger each day because uncertainty creates emotional tension that the mind desperately wants to resolve. Yet observation alone rarely satisfies that need. Eventually, simply watching from a distance stops feeling enough. That is when the balance of control begins shifting in ways neither person fully expected. Every relationship develops emotional patterns, and those patterns often create invisible roles. One person pursues while the other waits. One person fixes every misunderstanding, while the other expects problems to solve themselves. One person keeps conversations alive, while the other responds whenever they choose. These roles become comfortable because both people grow used to them. Your silence quietly disrupts that balance. Suddenly they can no longer predict when you will appear, or whether you will appear at all. Losing predictability often creates discomfort because people feel safest when they believe they understand what another person will do next. Once that certainty disappears, they begin feeling the loss of control. Some respond by reaching out casually. Others suddenly become warmer than they were before. Some create opportunities to restart conversations that previously seemed unimportant. This change can look like genuine emotional growth, but appearances can be misleading. Sometimes people are changing because they truly recognize your value. Other times they are simply reacting to a broken pattern. They miss the attention, not necessarily the relationship itself. They miss knowing they could always count on your effort. That difference is incredibly important because many people mistake renewed attention for genuine transformation. Real change is reflected in consistent actions over time, not sudden emotional reactions caused by uncertainty. The interruption of an old pattern often creates temporary behavior that disappears once the familiar dynamic returns. That is why patience becomes so important during this stage. Instead of assuming every positive signal represents lasting change, it becomes necessary to observe whether new behavior remains consistent when uncertainty fades. And this is exactly where the real tests usually begin. The tests often arrive quietly rather than dramatically. A simple message appears after weeks of silence, a random reaction to one of your posts, a short conversation that seems meaningless on the surface, an unexpected compliment, question that could have been answered without contacting you. A memory from months or years ago suddenly gets mentioned. Sometimes they check whether you viewed something they shared. Sometimes they create reasons to appear in your life again, without openly admitting why. These actions are often attempts to measure the emotional distance between you now. They want to know whether the old pattern still exists. If they send a small message, will you immediately respond with the same enthusiasm? If they offer a little attention, will you return to giving everything again? These moments are not always conscious manipulation. Many people do them without fully realizing why. The human mind naturally tests uncertainty because it wants reassurance. They are trying to discover whether your silence represents temporary frustration or permanent change. This is why reacting exactly as you always have immediately restores the previous dynamic. The uncertainty disappears. The old pattern returns. But when your response remains calm, balanced, and emotionally healthy, something very different begins happening. Instead of chasing, explaining every feeling, or rushing to repair every uncomfortable silence, you simply remain steady. You answer without desperation. You communicate without pressure. You no longer feel responsible for carrying the emotional weight of every interaction. This calmness often surprises the other person because they expected urgency. They expected the familiar version of you who immediately tried to restore closeness. Instead, they encounter someone who respects both themselves and the relationship equally. Emotional stability has a powerful effect because it removes the emotional imbalance that once defined the connection. Confidence expressed through calm behavior often communicates more than endless emotional explanations ever could. It shows that your happiness is no longer dependent on another person's decisions. It demonstrates that your peace does not disappear every time someone becomes distant. That quiet strength changes the emotional atmosphere completely. Suddenly, they are interacting with someone they cannot easily predict anymore. Yet not every story continues the same way. Some people recognize your growth and begin changing themselves. Others slowly drift away because the relationship only survived while one person kept chasing. And that difference reveals a truth that cannot be ignored. Some people never come back, and painful as that may feel, it often provides the clearest answer of all. When someone permanently disappears after you stop carrying the relationship alone, it suggests the connection depended far more on your effort than on mutual commitment. That realization hurts because it forces you to see the relationship without the hope that once kept it alive. Yet, clarity, even when painful, is often healthier than endless uncertainty. Healthy relationships are built by two people choosing each other repeatedly. They are sustained through shared effort, shared communication, shared responsibility, and shared emotional investment. One person cannot create lasting connection by constantly chasing another. Eventually, exhaustion replaces hope. Silence replaces effort. When the relationship cannot survive without one person doing all the work, it exposes a truth that was always present beneath the surface. And understanding that truth opens the door to the biggest lesson of all. The greatest mistake people make is believing that stopping the chase is about winning. It isn't. It isn't about making someone feel guilty. It isn't about proving a point. And it isn't about creating enough distance that they suddenly come running back. Real change begins when you stop measuring your worth by someone else's attention. The moment you stop chasing is often the moment you stop abandoning yourself. Instead of spending every day wondering why they haven't called, why they seem distant, or how you can fix what has already exhausted you, you begin investing that same energy into your own peace. That shift changes everything, because your happiness is no longer controlled by another person's choices. Some people will eventually realize what they lost. They may reach out with apologies they never thought they would say. They may finally recognize the effort you gave so freely for so long. Others will try to reconnect, because they miss the comfort of knowing you would always be there. And some people will quietly disappear forever. As painful as that may seem, every one of these outcomes gives you something valuable. It gives you clarity. It reveals who truly valued you as a person, and who simply valued the attention, patience, and emotional energy you provided. That kind of truth is worth far more than temporary reassurance, because it helps you build healthier relationships in the future. One of the strongest signs of emotional growth is not how many people come back after you stop chasing. It is how peaceful you remain, no matter what they decide to do. When your confidence no longer depends on being chosen, your life begins to change in ways you never expected. You stop forcing connections that only survive because of your effort. You stop begging for the respect you should have received naturally. You stop confusing constant struggle with genuine love. Instead, you create space for relationships built on mutual care, mutual respect, and mutual commitment. Those are the relationships that last, because both people choose each other willingly, not because one person refuses to let go. Always remember this: silence is not weakness. Walking away from an unhealthy pattern is not failure. Choosing your own peace is not selfish. Sometimes the bravest thing you will ever do is stop chasing someone who has become comfortable watching you do all the work. That decision may feel painful at first, but it often becomes the beginning of your greatest emotional freedom. The moment you stop chasing isn't always the end of the story. Sometimes it's the first moment you finally discover who was truly willing to walk beside you. If this video helped you see relationships from a new perspective, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more powerful psychology insights, emotional wisdom, and personal growth content that can truly change the way you understand people and yourself. Don't forget to like this video if you found it valuable, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. Your support helps us create more videos that inspire, educate, and empower people around the world. Now we'd love to hear from you. What changed in your life when you finally stopped chasing someone? Did they come back, or did you discover something even more valuable about yourself? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story could be the encouragement someone else needs to take their first step toward emotional freedom. Until next time, take care of yourself, protect your peace, and remember that the right people never have to be chased. They choose to walk beside you.